Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we are doing another Zephyr deck profile. You guys know this is one of my favorite decks to play, especially on the competitive scene. I think it's an entirely slept on rogue deck. Nobody really respects it, but it does some things that just no deck is really equipped to deal with, even in their side deck, and I think that's huge. But particularly what we're talking about today, because I just uploaded a Zephyr profile just a couple of weeks ago, is I do want to focus on the Splight format. When we get into Power of the Elements, when Splight takes over as most likely the best deck in the game, and we also have to look at Tier Elements as a potential threat. I do want to show you a build and some of the choices I would make to pivot this deck into a style of format that needs to deal with those two particular decks. So this is kind of going to be an anti-Splight Tier Elements build. I'll just show you some of the options that I would play to kind of like pivot and be able to handle those matchups a little easier. But yeah, other than that, it's going to be a lot of the similar stuff. I mean, we know Zephyr, so we'll be able to crank through a lot at the beginning of the list, but let's get into it. You guys know the high scales: triple Zephyrath, triple Zephyr, one Zephyraxiton, one Wendy. This doesn't change for me. I really like this. As I've said it before, Zephyrath is like your best starter. It's like your hidden city, whereas Zephyr is like your guru. Without either, the deck doesn't do nearly enough. They are the two most important cards in the deck. No questions asked. And then Zephyraxiton popping face down cards and being the biggest beater in the main deck, as well as Zephyr Wendy getting you a bunch of resources rotated so you can do bigger and bigger pendulum summons every turn is really huge. Next up, we have our low scales here. You always want to pair these with your Zephyrath, triple Zephyraxi, triple Zephyr Thuban, and one Zephyr Naga. Yeah, I mean, I think this is also pretty standard. I mean, I've seen people mess around with other one scales, Zephyr Empilica instead of Zephyr Naga, but I think this is fine. Here, there are random hands where this comes up with like making Zephyr less of a brick. But yeah, like these are great. I really would love to see a new Zephyr main deck monster, and maybe a Link, like a Link 2 that's like good and like does something specific to help Zephyrs would be awesome, but that's another video topic. So that's for the low scales. Always going to pair one of those with Zephyrath, and because of that, we actually focus on getting to our field spell because it gets us anything we want, low scale, Zephyrath, whatever. So I do like playing triple Pathfinder. This helps us get to our Oracle. If not, I do play a secondary option because that is kind of anti-meta that I'll show you when we get there. But really, really cool card. I always mess around with a handful of engines in Zephyr. This is definitely one of the more control-based ones, not as much about like putting board presence on the field and like getting a bunch of bodies on like some of the other ones in the past have been oriented in. But I still really like this one because this one buffs consistency more than those other package, I would argue. And plus it has even more insane synergy with Gamma. The last like monster I play that's like a real monster, not a hand trap, is Majesty's Fiend. This is one of the anti-meta things I've talked about for that format. So two things specifically versus Splight. One, almost their entire deck needs monster effects to like play. Pretty much. Like they literally have to draw like an exact after this, but the thing is, you're never just ending on this. You're only ever ending on this if you have access to one of the counter traps as well. So it's always protected from one out, whether it be droplets or imperm or whatever. You always have one protection from one out, so they have to have essentially two and then a way to play. But this card's insane, not only because it stops Splites from really using any monster effects, but also because it's 2,400. Without Zeus, like Splites literally don't have a monster big enough. Literally just don't have a regular monster in their deck that they can summon easily that's like big enough to walk over this. So that's always the worry, is like, oh, okay, you stop them from monster effects, but they can just plop a big boy. They'll just walk over you. Splites don't really do that. So this card is an absolute house, and especially backed up with a counter trap even more so. Plus, against Tier Elements, especially when they first come out, they are so reliant on monster effects, and I still think they are. They literally can't. They don't play fusion spells. They some of them I think actually might play polymerization, I think, with the Swamp guy, but depending on the build, they literally like, and depending on the hand, they won't be able to fusion summon at all unless they have without a monster effect. So this literally shuts them down, and obviously it's a fusion deck. If they don't get a fusion off, they literally can't play. I would argue that like Despy is a little bit better playing into this because they can just like, if they have the material for it, just fuse straight into a big Chungus and then like threaten you, but they have to have a fusion spell plus materials for it if it's not, you know, depending on the hand. So again, like if you have an Omni Negate, shut down the one fusion spell they have, and then from there, like they're probably just in trouble. So still cool. But yeah, this card is insane. Absolute house versus both those decks. I think that'll probably be the best anti-meta like Croco Dragon line target that you can play in the deck. From here, we go to hand traps. Triple Gamma. We always play Gamma, and I am on triple Shifter now. In my last profile I showed you, I only played 2 Shifter and 1 Ash because if you already used your normal summon on Pathfinder, you might want to search like a normal summon reliant target, but also you don't have to go down the Croco Dragon line like ever if you don't really want to. So that's not a huge deal to me. And you can always just search a Gamma. So when even if your opponent does plan on breaking through your board, they have to sit there and know that if they try to break through you, you're going to have the Gamma in hand. So they won't be able to go too far after they break through you. But this card is just too good versus Tear and Splites, in my opinion. The fact that they rely so much on the Frog engine to really like get a ton of resources to the field, this just turns that off pretty much completely, as well as the fact that like after Gigantic Splight being their main like place starter, like to like get things going, like engine piece, after that they kind of just have to rely on Elf. So if you have this plus Gamma, like bro, they literally can't do anything. They have like no way to play through that in the entire deck. But it's just so good. This just limits what their grindability. It limits the amount of interruptions they're allowed to end on. It's really, really solid, all things considered. So I'm a big fan of those. They're just really high impact. You're playing a pendulum deck where you need to see at least 2 card combos to play. So I don't want to play too many hand traps. That's why we play some higher impact ones. So now we get to the spells. Triple Oracle, 1 Necro Valley, and the Terraforming. This is really cool. I love this. I messed around with ideas with this with maybe playing Zombie World in the past format for stuff like Sword Soul and Fluanderies. But if you ran into Despia or like a Punk Therian deck, like well, Therian still gets hurt by it, but Punk really doesn't. So they can do a lot of their synchro stuff still. So like it's just like half the decks cared about Zombie World a lot, and half of them just literally didn't at all. So it could just be completely dead in matchups. So that kind of scared me off. But I do think when we're in Splight format, and Splight is by far the most played deck, I think Necro Valley is insane. Also Tier Elements, insane as well. Yeah, I mean, just long story short, Necro Valley, I believe, you know, ruling is weird because like Necro Valley's had so many printings, but I believe Ronin Totem can't revive itself because it needs to banish a toad, another frog, and this card says your opponent can't move cards from the graveyard. Or yeah, cards can't be banished, period. And your, they also can't Elf. Elf can't reborn anything as well, and that cuts off like everything except for like what Gigantic Splight does and whatever they're able to extend from the hand. So you just pretty much take the graveyard out of play as an extension tool for them, and so you literally just limit them to like Gigantic Splight and whatever they have in the hand, which makes them so much easier to beat. It means 1 hand trap, 1 interruption will probably you know, put them in a compromised position. So this card's insane, and obviously versus Tier Elements, the fact that they're almost always fusing from grave, this card is really good versus them as well. It's insane, and also just the fact that triple Pathfinder plus this and Pathfinder searchable off Croco Dragon, it is so easy to get to this card. And I think that's the leg up, is there is no Necroworld Banshee equivalent for Necro Valley that gives any deck that like Foolish Burials a way to like access that card. They just like, oh, if they're playing a terraforming deck, I guess technically they have 2 copies instead of just 1. They could play Metaverse, whatever. Like it's so much more mediocre because they like other decks just won't be able to access it as easy as we can, but we can search Pathfinder to search it. And then we also just play 4 other copies of Terraforming to just open it. Like it's so much more accessible in this deck. Then you got to continue with consistency pieces, Providence, Prosperity. I'm sorry, Prosperity is the best spell to play in the deck, pot card for consistency. It just is. You get away with Desires probably, but you have so many one-ofs that you can search that like you just don't want to hit them when they're like crucial. And the defensive cards, 1 Path, Double War, 1 Divine Strike, 1 9 Pillars. I've considered dropping War to 1, but I think you got to play at least 1 copy of all of these. I just think they're so good. Path is an insane floodgate. So pretty much versus Splites, they can't resolve Gigantic Splight, they can't resolve Elf, they can't resolve Ronin. They just have to extend from hand and like get to extra deck pieces from there. They have to pretty much like try to Zeus you. But like, again, I never try to go for this card unless I have a counter trap. So like if I see that their play is clearly going to Zeus, I just save the counter trap for Zeus and the duel's over. So, and then these just insane, just so good. But yeah, that is it for the main deck. 42, actually, we are over 40 finally. But the additions are essentially like the extra copy of Shifter and the 1 copy of Necro Valley. And then we swapped some other cards around as well. Into the extra, a lot of similar stuff we've seen in the past. 1 controller. In a control pendulum deck, this card is so good. It comes up so much. Beyond the Pendulum, Lambda, Lina, Asa, and IP for the Link 2s. They all come up in their own way, whether it's a quick Link or the Destruction Protection. This comes up. Reviving stuff like Light and Earth are the easiest to access. Charmers in the deck. This to make Gamma live or to bluff Gamma is good. And then Beyond the Pendulum, obviously getting us a free scale, but also being able to pop cards is insanely, insanely good. This card comes up all the time. It's probably my new favorite Link 2 to take advantage of. Link 3 is 1 Unicorn, 1 access code for Link 4s, and then the Underworld Goddess. This is easily the most cuttable card in the extra. I just don't have anything that I'd play over it right now. For random matchups, you know, adding Nisters, whatever, being able to out their thing. They don't over pressure you with like a ton of interruptions. They just have a card that's just like too hard to out. But if you can out it by just like amassing enough bodies on the field and playing defensively, you can kind of put them in a really tough spot. But outside of that, this card doesn't really come up that often. Or I guess something like in the Dragon Link matchup, also outing the Boral, whatever it's called. Boral, whatever. The big Link 5 Boral. For Lexeeds, only the 1 Sheridan because it pairs so well with Horus. If you don't know about this combo, look it up. It's just too good, and I'm tired of explaining it because it takes too long. You take a bunch of stuff from your opponent, and you get some beaters on your field just by making 1 level 6 Synchro. For the Synchro 8s, 1 Omega, this punishes your opponent for going first. I guess the one thing I would consider is maybe playing like Starlight aside next to this, because this is your going first resolving Gamma target to help rip another card, whereas Starlight would be a more offensive, like resolving Gamma on your opponent's turn going second. On your turn going second, so that you can just make Starlight and immediately try to like wipe their field to either bait another interruption or just straight up do it and just take control of the duel. I think that's pretty good. I would like that as a second target maybe. And then we have the 9s, 1 Crocker Dragon. This card's insane. It's how you search Majesty's Fiend or any other monster in your deck. And then the 1 Shen. Card's also insane. I just talked about how Shifter is really good versus both Terra Elements and Splites. This is kind of a similar thing. Once you know the matchup, you can make this card, and it's really, really powerful. Floodgate, especially when you back it up with counter traps, because then they just don't have outs. It's also 2800. So again, big beaters with Floodgate effects versus Splites are pretty good. Last card here is Nirvana High Paladin. It's a good way to get any card back from the graveyard, and it's also a beater, and it's also easy to make in Pendulum decks. Listen, I don't have Baron de Fleur. If I did, I'd try to find room for it. So maybe I would consider dropping the High Paladin and the Underworld Goddess for like Scarlight, sorry. I keep being Starlight. Scarlight, Red Dragon Archfiend, as well as Baron de Fleur. This deck can make Baron super easily, because if you pen summon Zephyraxi plus Zephyr-Nu, you can make Zephyr-Nu a tuner with Zephyraxi, and then Zephyr-Nu can just search you Oracle or Providence into Oracle, and then that gets you one of your level 4s, and then there you go. Normal summon the level 4, make Baron. So like, if you have access to that play, which gets you Crocker Dragon, you essentially also have access to the Baron play. Plus maybe a Link if you want it. If you have another, if you have any other monster access. So really, really cool. I like the deck a lot. I think going into this format, it's a pretty good pick, because Splight isn't like overwhelming. If they pop off turn 1, they're hard to beat. They just have multiple negations, and like if they just go negate Sephiroth, negate other scale, you have to have exactly like you know, a ton of scales in hand and access to Zephyr, just kind of asking a lot. But post side, obviously you're able to side more stuff. The one particular thing side deck wise that I like to mention with this deck is Lava Golem. I think Lava Golem's really good versus Splight. Being able to just clear the Toad plus the Elf really takes away a lot of their recursion. So, and also pretty much clears, most of the time will clear all of their interruptions. And so, yes, they'll probably have some follow-up, but if it's limited to like not getting that second add off of Toad and not getting Reborns off of Elf on your turn, I think it gives you a really good chance to be able to play into them going second. So I really think the deck will be in a solid position going into next format, especially when like the best deck does have blatant weaknesses, and this deck can very clearly take advantage of them. Also, another thing with them being small, if you just pen summon Zephyr, he's 2,600. He is not easy to out, so they have to like find ways to out him cleanly. As long as you can neutralize the Zeus, be very wary of Zeus. If they can threaten you with Zeus, that is the biggest thing. But as long as you can handle a Zeus into your board, you should be good in most scenarios, especially going first. So very, very good. Nothing much else to say here. Thank you so much for watching. As always, guys, let me know in the comment section down below any other options you would consider as far as building Zephyr for specifically Power of the Elements format, and with Splites being the presumed best deck when that drops. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to do theory stuff, so let me know your thoughts down below. I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. Peace.